Owen called it helping. He showed up with his truck and moving blankets, saying the house was too much for me to manage alone. "Let me put your valuables in storage, Uncle Howie, just temporary." He patted my shoulder like I was a confused child. I watched him load my mother's silver, Eleanor's jewelry box, the antique clock that had been in our family for 3 generations. I signed his paperwork because my hands shook. Because I was just a lonely old man who baked too much banana bread. That's what he saw. He had no idea what I kept in the firebox. The morning Owen came with the truck, I'd been up since 5:30 making cinnamon rolls. The dough had risen overnight in the refrigerator, and I'd rolled it out on the counter. Eleanor and I bought at an estate sale in Scottsdale 30 years back. The surface was scarred from decades of knife work, worn smooth in the center where countless rolling pins had traveled. My hands worked the dough automatically while my mind stayed elsewhere, the way it did most mornings now. Muscle memory from 4 decades of weekend baking. The kitchen smelled like yeast and butter and cinnamon, the same smell that used to pull Eleanor out of bed on Saturday mornings, barefoot and smiling in her bathrobe. Now it just filled empty rooms. I made a full batch anyway. 18 rolls. Enough to feed a family I didn't have any more. I'd take most of them to the senior center or leave them on Mrs. Kowalski's porch next door. She had arthritis and appreciated not having to cook. The oven timer was counting down when I heard the truck in the driveway. Diesel engine, heavy suspension. I looked through the kitchen window and saw Owen climbing out of a Ford F-150, dark blue, extended cab, maybe 10 years old but well-maintained. 2 other men got out with him. Younger guys, built like they worked construction or moved furniture for a living. One of them opened the truck bed and pulled out thick moving blankets, the quilted kind professionals use. Owen saw me watching through the window and waved. Big smile. Confident. I dried my hands on a dish towel and met him at the front door before he could knock. "Uncle Howie." His voice was loud, cheerful, the tone people use with children or the very old. "I brought some help. We're gonna get your valuables secured today. I didn't invite you." I know. But I've been thinking about it all week. You're here alone in this big house with all of Mom's antiques, Eleanor's jewelry, all that stuff just sitting here. It's not safe. The house has an alarm system. Owen stepped past me into the living room without waiting for permission. Sure. But alarms don't stop determined thieves. And what if there's a fire? All those irreplaceable things, gone. Better to have them in a climate-controlled facility. Professional security. I can manage that for you. His 2 friends followed him inside, boots heavy on the hardwood floor. Eleanor and I had refinished ourselves one summer. They didn't wipe their feet. Owen walked through the living room touching things the way an appraiser would. His fingers traced the edge of the walnut display cabinet that held Eleanor's collection of Ladro figurines. Porcelain, delicate, accumulated over 23 years of birthdays and anniversaries. Each one chosen carefully, wrapped carefully, placed carefully. "This should definitely go into storage," Owen said. "Way too valuable to leave sitting out." "It's been sitting out for 23 years. "Yeah, and you've been lucky." "But luck runs out, Uncle Howie." "That's just statistics." One of his friends, the taller one with the buzz cut and the neck tattoo, started wrapping the figurines in newspaper without asking. Quick, efficient movements. Professional. Owen moved to the mantel where Eleanor's jewelry box sat. Mahogany inlay, velvet interior, a gift from her mother before we got married. Inside were her rings, her pearls, the silver bracelet I'd given her on our 30th anniversary. "This definitely needs protection," Owen said, picking it up. "Doesn't even have a lock. Anyone could just walk in and take it." "No one's walked in for 38 years. Owen smiled. Patient. Condescending. "Uncle Howie, I know you've been on your own since Aunt Eleanor passed. That's hard. And I know you're used to doing things your way. But sometimes family has to step in and help, even when you don't think you need it. Especially then." He carried the jewelry box to the door and handed it to the shorter friend, the one with the goatee and the CrossFit build. "This goes in the cab," Owen said. "Keep it with you." The friend nodded and disappeared outside. My chest felt tight. Not panic. Not anger. Something colder. A sensation like watching a machine malfunction in slow motion, seeing exactly how the gears would strip but being unable to stop the process. Owen pulled a clipboard from his back pocket. I need you to sign this. Just a formality. Storage facility requires authorization. What facility? SEC Restore Plus, off Industrial Boulevard. Climate controlled, 24-hour security, fire suppression system. Top rated. I've already got the unit leased. 10 by 15. Perfect size. I took the clipboard. The form was dense text, legal language about liability and access rights and indemnification. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something else. Low blood sugar maybe. I hadn't eaten since the toast at 6. The letters blurred slightly. Owen handed me a pen. Just sign at the bottom, Uncle Howie. This just says I'm authorized to store your property for safekeeping. Totally standard. I signed. My signature came out shaky, the H in Howard trailing off into an illegible scrawl. Owen took the clipboard back and smiled wider. Perfect. Don't worry about a thing. I've got this handled. For the next 2 hours I stood in my living room and watched them empty it. The Ladro figurines. The walnut display cabinet. The brass floor lamp Eleanor found at an antique store in Sedona. The framed photographs from our trip to Maine. The quilts her grandmother made. The serving platters we only used at Thanksgiving. Everything that made the room ours, boxed and blanketed and carried out to the truck. Owen directed traffic, pointing, organizing, maintaining a steady stream of reassurance. You're doing the right thing, Uncle Howie. You'll sleep better knowing this stuff is safe. This is what family does. We take care of each other. By 11:30 the truck was loaded. Owen handed me a business card for SEC Restore Plus with a unit number written on the back in ballpoint pen. 247. That's you. I've got the only key, so don't worry about keeping track of anything. You just relax. What if I need something? Owen paused, one boot on the running board of his truck. Like what? I don't know. Eleanor's pearls. A photograph. Owen's expression shifted. Still smiling, but different somehow. Tighter. Uncle Howie, the whole point is to keep this stuff safe and out of the way. You don't need to be going through it. That's just dwelling on the past. Not healthy. If you really need something, call me. We'll figure it out. He climbed into the truck. The diesel engine coughed to life, loud and rough. The two friends were already in the cab, the shorter one holding Eleanor's jewelry box on his lap like a package. Owen leaned out the window. I'll check on you in a few days. And hey, start thinking about maybe downsizing. This house is a lot for one person. You could get a nice condo, something manageable. I could help you with that too. The truck pulled away. I stood in my driveway and watched it disappear down Sycamore Drive, carrying 38 years of my life toward a storage unit I couldn't access, controlled by a man who decided I was too old to manage my own possessions. The living room looked gutted. Rectangles of darker hardwood where furniture had stood. Dust outlines on the mantel. Bare walls where photographs had hung. I walked through the space slowly, my footsteps echoing in a way they never had before. The house felt like it was holding its breath. I went to the kitchen. The cinnamon rolls had cooled on the counter, 18 of them arranged on a wire rack, frosting hardening in the dry Arizona air. I packed 16 into containers for Mrs. Kowalski and the senior center. Ate 2 standing at the sink, barely tasting them. Then I walked down the hallway to my study and closed the door. The room was small, barely 10 by 12, with a single window facing the backyard. Eleanor had used it as a sewing room before she got sick. After she died I'd moved my desk in, along with the filing cabinets and the banker boxes full of tax returns and mortgage paperwork and all the documentation of a life spent paying for things on time and in full. The firebox sat in the corner behind my desk. Sentry Safe Model X055, fireproof to 1700 degrees, waterproof to 3 feet. Battleship gray, heavy enough that it took 2 men to move it. I'd bought it at Home Depot in 1995 for $189.99 after a break-in 2 streets over made Eleanor nervous. The combination lock was mechanical, no batteries, no electronics. 4 numbers I'd never written down because I didn't need to. Eleanor's birthday. I opened it. Inside, everything that mattered. The original deed to 447 Sycamore Drive, recorded March 1988, showing Howard Bell as sole owner. The satisfaction of mortgage, recorded June 2003, stamped and notarized by Commonwealth Title and Trust. Proof that I'd made every payment, $743.26 per month for 15 years, never late, never missed. Property tax receipts going back 38 years, filed chronologically in manila folders. Title insurance policy. Homeowners insurance declarations. The survey map from when we bought the house, showing exact property boundaries. My will, updated last year, leaving everything to the Humane Society and the VA. And beneath all of that, a copy of the storage authorization form I'd signed 2 hours ago. I pulled it out and read it carefully this time, without Owen standing over me, without my hands shaking. Temporary safeguarding of personal property. Owner retains all rights and title. Authorization may be revoked at any time. I read it 3 times. Then I put it back in the firebox, closed the door, spun the combination lock. Owen had taken furniture. He'd taken sentiment. He'd taken objects. But he'd left me with documents. And documents were what mattered. The clock on my desk showed 12:15. I had 3 hours before the bank closed. Desert National Bank occupied a single-story building on Camelback Road, built in the 80s with that beige stucco and tinted glass every Arizona bank seemed to require. I'd done my business there for 32 years, since before Eleanor got sick, since before retirement, since before the house was paid off. The parking lot asphalt radiated heat even though it was only 1 in the afternoon. I sat in my truck for 5 minutes with the engine running and the air conditioning blasting, feeling the cold air dry the sweat on my collar. My hands rested on the steering wheel. Steady now. The shaking from this morning was gone. I'd brought the firebox documents in a leather portfolio Eleanor gave me when I retired from the county assessor's office. Brown calfskin, worn soft at the corners, brass zipper slightly tarnished. Inside, everything Owen thought didn't matter. I locked the truck and walked across the parking lot. The heat hit like a physical weight, that dry furnace blast that makes your lungs tighten. Inside, the bank was overcooled and quiet except for the hum of ventilation and the soft click of keyboard keys. I knew the layout without thinking. Teller stations on the left, customer service desks on the right, offices in the back. Rachel Domingo sat at the second desk, mid-40s, professional in a way that felt competent rather than performative. We'd worked together on refinancing the house back in 2001. She looked up and recognized me immediately. Mr. Bell. She stood and shook my hand. Her grip was firm, brief, no nonsense. What brings you in today? I need to verify some account details and discuss asset protection. Rachel gestured to the chair across from her desk. Of course. Let me pull up your accounts. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, eyes scanning the screen. Checking and savings both active, no issues. Are you concerned about something specific? I opened the portfolio and removed the storage authorization form. My nephew had me sign this morning. He removed property from my house and placed it in a storage facility under his name. I need to understand my legal position. Rachel took the form and read it carefully. Her expression remained neutral but her jaw tightened slightly. This says temporary safeguarding. It doesn't transfer ownership. Your property remains legally yours. Can he prevent me from accessing it? Technically no. But if the storage lease is in his name and he controls the physical key, you'd need his cooperation or a court order to gain entry. She handed the form back. Has he indicated he plans to keep your property? Not explicitly. But he suggested I should downsize, sell my house, let him manage the proceeds. Rachel leaned back in her chair. Mr. Bell, I'm not an attorney, but I've seen situations like this before. Family members positioning themselves as helpful while actually maneuvering for control. If you're concerned, you should document everything and consider consulting an estate lawyer. I have documentation. I pulled out the deed and mortgage satisfaction. I own my home free and clear. I have a current will that doesn't include my nephew. I need to ensure my accounts can't be accessed or challenged if he tries to claim I'm incompetent. Rachel's expression shifted. That's specific. Has he suggested you're incompetent? Not in those words. But he treated me like a confused old man who couldn't be trusted with his own possessions. That's often how it starts. She turned to her computer. Let me check your account beneficiaries and authorization settings. A few clicks, then she frowned. You have no designated beneficiaries on your accounts. After death, everything goes through probate and follows your will. That's correct. And there are no joint account holders, no power of attorney on file, no authorized signers except you. Rachel looked at me directly. That's good. It means your nephew has no legal access. But if he's already moving your physical property, he may escalate. I've seen cases where family members try to have someone declared incompetent to gain conservatorship. Have you had a cognitive evaluation recently? Last year. Annual physical with my doctor. He ran the standard tests. Memory, reasoning, everything normal for my age. Get that in writing. Rachel pulled a notepad and wrote something down. Ask your doctor for a formal letter stating you're cognitively sound. Keep it with your other documents. If your nephew tries anything legal, you'll have dated proof of competency. She tore off the page and handed it to me. And consider putting your assets in a trust. It's harder to challenge than a will, and it keeps everything out of probate. Who do I talk to about that? She wrote another name. Margaret Chen, estate attorney, office on 7th Street. Tell her I referred you. She handles a lot of elder law cases. She'll understand the situation immediately. I took both pieces of paper and put them in the portfolio. The leather creaked slightly, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times. Thank you. Rachel stood and extended her hand again. Mr. Bell, I don't know your nephew, but I know the pattern. If someone's trying to convince you that you can't manage your own affairs while simultaneously taking control of your assets, that's not help. That's theft with a friendly face. Protect yourself. I shook her hand and left. The heat outside felt clarifying after the artificial cold of the bank. I sat in my truck and called Margaret Chen's office from the number Rachel had written. A receptionist answered on the second ring, professional voice, slightly rushed. Chen and Associates. I need to consult about estate protection. Possible conservatorship threat from a family member. There was a pause, the sound of keyboard typing. We have an opening tomorrow at 10. Is that too soon? That's perfect. Name and callback number. Howard Bell. I gave her my cell. She confirmed the appointment and hung up. Efficient. No small talk. I like that. The drive home took 20 minutes through midday traffic. I stopped at the grocery store and bought ingredients I didn't need. Flour, sugar, eggs, butter. The components of cookies or bread or cake. Things I'd make and give away because eating alone felt like admitting defeat. The checker was a kid, maybe 19, with bleached hair and a name tag that said Tyler. He rang up my items without looking at me, without speaking, just the beep of the scanner and the rustle of bags. The total was $43.67. I paid with cash and drove home. The house looked the same from outside. Two-story territorial style, stucco and tile, mature landscaping. Eleanor and I had planted tree by tree. The driveway where Owen's truck had sat this morning was empty now. I carried the groceries inside and set them on the kitchen counter next to the empty cooling racks from the cinnamon rolls. The living room still looked gutted. I walked through it without stopping and went back to my study. Closed the door. Sat at my desk. The silence was different now. Not peaceful. Expectant. Like the moment before a storm when the air pressure drops and you can feel the weather changing. I opened the firebox again and removed everything. Spread the documents across my desk in chronological order. The deed from March 1988. The mortgage payment records, monthly statements in manila folders, 15 years of proof. The satisfaction of mortgage from June 2003. The tax receipts. The insurance policies. The will. 40 years of my adult life reduced to paper and ink and notary stamps. But paper and ink were real. They were enforceable. They were mine. I thought about Owen's face this morning. That patient condescending smile. Uncle Howie, I know you're used to doing things your way. But sometimes family has to step in and help. The assumption that age equaled incompetence. That loneliness equaled vulnerability. That grief made me easy to manipulate. He wasn't entirely wrong. For 3 years I'd let him borrow money he never repaid. Let him park his problems in my driveway and his schemes in my kitchen. Let him treat me like an ATM with a pulse because saying no felt cruel. Because Eleanor would have wanted me to help family. Because being needed felt better than being alone. That was the trap. Not malice. Not stupidity. Just the basic human desire to be useful to someone. Owen had seen that desire and weaponized it. And I'd let him because the alternative was admitting that my role in the family had been reduced to writing checks and baking bread and waiting to die quietly in a house too big for one person. But this morning had crossed a line. Taking my possessions wasn't asking for help. It was declaring ownership. Suggesting I downsize wasn't expressing concern. It was planning liquidation. Owen didn't want to help me. He wanted to harvest me. And I was done being harvested. I put the documents back in the firebox except for the storage authorization. That one I set aside. Tomorrow I'd see Margaret Chen and start the process of making myself legally untouchable. But tonight I needed to understand exactly what Owen thought he'd accomplished. I pulled out my laptop, old Dell from 2015, slow but functional, and searched for SEC Restore Plus. Their website loaded with stock photos of clean hallways and combination locks and promises of security. I found the rates. 10 by 15 unit, $195 per month. 12-month lease minimum. $2,340 paid up front. Climate-controlled, 24-hour surveillance, individual unit alarms. Professional operation. Legitimate business. Which meant Owen had spent real money to store my property. That was interesting. If this was simple theft, he could have loaded my things into his garage or sold them immediately. But he'd paid for secure storage and given me the unit number. He was playing a longer game. I thought about his suggestion to downsize. Sell the house, get a condo, something manageable. If I sold, the house would bring somewhere between $400,000 and $450,000 based on comparable sales in the neighborhood. After fees and closing costs, maybe $380,000 net. Owen had probably already calculated that number. Had probably already decided how much of it should come to him for his help managing the sale and the move and the downsizing of my life. And if I was in a condo or assisted living, who would manage my remaining assets? Who would have power of attorney? Who would make medical decisions if I became incapacitated? Owen. Helpful Owen. Family Owen. Owen who cared so much he'd take the burden of my estate off my shoulders. I could see the entire trajectory now. The slow accumulation of control. The gradual redefinition of our relationship from nephew and uncle to caretaker and dependent. It wouldn't happen all at once. It would be incremental. Reasonable. Each step justified by concern and family obligation. Until one day I'd wake up and realize I owned nothing, controlled nothing, decided nothing. And by then it would be too late to fight back because he'd have legal authority and documented proof that I'd consented to every step. That was the plan. That was what this morning had been. The opening move. Except Owen had made one critical miscalculation. He'd assumed that because I was old and lonely and generous, I was also stupid. He'd assumed that 40 years as a county assessor had taught me nothing about property law and documentation and the difference between legal ownership and physical possession. He'd assumed the firebox didn't exist. I closed the laptop and looked at the storage authorization one more time. Temporary safeguarding. Authorization may be revoked at any time. Owen had given me the weapon to destroy him. He'd probably had his friend draft the form specifically to look legitimate, to cover himself legally, to prove he had my permission. But that same legitimacy meant I could revoke it. Walk into SEC Restore Plus with my ID and the authorization and demand access to my property. Owen would lose his leverage immediately. But that would be the obvious move. The reactive move. And obvious moves were how you lost. I'd spent 40 years evaluating property disputes. Boundary disagreements, easement conflicts, title challenges. The people who won weren't the ones who reacted emotionally. They were the ones who documented everything, built airtight cases, and struck when the opponent had committed completely. Owen thought he had me cornered. Thought I'd panic or cave or accept his help because I had no other options. Better to let him keep thinking that. Let him escalate. Let him put his intentions in writing or in front of witnesses. Let him cross from exploitation into something actionable. Then I'd show him what was in the firebox. I put the authorization back with the other documents and locked everything away. Spun the combination dial. Tomorrow I'd see Margaret Chen and start building the legal fortress. Tonight I'd make dinner and eat it alone in my gutted living room and let Owen believe he'd won. The trap was set. I just needed him to walk into it. Margaret Chen's office was on the third floor of a medical building that had been repurposed for professional services. The elevator smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet adhesive. The walls were the textured beige contractors use when they want something that won't show dirt. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat in the waiting room with my portfolio on my lap, feeling the air conditioning vent blow directly on the back of my neck. Cold fingers of recycled air that made my collar damp. A receptionist sat behind sliding glass, younger woman, maybe 30, with efficient hands and eyes that didn't linger. She'd checked me in without small talk, handed me a clipboard with intake forms, and returned to her computer screen. The forms asked standard questions. Name, date of birth, reason for consultation. I wrote carefully in block letters, the pen scratching slightly on the cheap paper. Reason for consultation, asset protection from potential conservatorship action by family member. The words looked stark written out like that. Clinical. I finished the forms and returned the clipboard. The receptionist took it without comment and disappeared into the back office. 5 minutes later Margaret Chen emerged. She was smaller than I'd expected from Rachel's description, maybe 5'3", probably 60, with gray hair cut short and practical. She wore slacks and a cardigan and glasses on a chain around her neck. Her handshake was brief and dry. Mr. Bell. This way. Her office was small and meticulously organized. Bookshelves lined with legal texts, filing cabinets labeled with color-coded tabs, desk clear except for a legal pad and a coffee mug with the handle turned precisely to the left. She gestured to the chair across from her desk and sat. Rachel Domingo called yesterday afternoon to give me context. Your nephew removed property from your home and is suggesting you need help managing your affairs. That's correct. I opened the portfolio and removed the documents. Deed showing sole ownership. Mortgage satisfaction showing the house is paid in full. Current will leaving assets to charity. Storage authorization my nephew had me sign yesterday morning. Margaret took each document and examined it, reading carefully, making occasional notes on her legal pad. Her pen moved in quick efficient strokes, no wasted motion. After several minutes she looked up. The storage authorization is legally sound but revocable. Your property remains yours. The deed and mortgage satisfaction prove ownership and solvency. Your will is properly executed. On paper, you're protected. But paper isn't always enough. I know. That's why I'm here. She set the documents down and folded her hands on the desk. Tell me about your nephew's behavior. Not what he's done. How he's done it. His tone, his words, his justification. I described yesterday morning. The truck arriving without invitation. The moving blankets prepared in advance. Owen's condescending patience. His insistence that I couldn't manage on my own. His suggestion that I downsize. His control of the storage unit key. The way he'd said you just relax like I was a child who'd been worrying about adult matters beyond my comprehension. Margaret wrote steadily while I talked. When I finished she tapped her pen against the legal pad. This is a classic conservatorship setup. He's establishing a narrative of your incompetence through helpful actions. When he eventually petitions for conservatorship, he'll point to these moments as evidence you couldn't manage without his intervention. The judge will see a concerned nephew who stepped in to protect a vulnerable elder. Can he succeed? Margaret tilted her head slightly. Do you have any cognitive impairment, memory issues, difficulty managing finances? No. Annual physical last year showed normal cognition for my age. Bank accounts are current and properly managed. Bills paid on time. No debt. Then he can't succeed if you fight back. But fighting is expensive and stressful, and even losing conservatorship cases can damage family relationships permanently. The better strategy is to make yourself legally bulletproof before he files anything. How? 3 steps. She held up fingers as she counted. First, we get a formal cognitive evaluation from a neuropsychologist, not just your regular doctor. Comprehensive testing that produces a detailed report. That report becomes dated proof of competency that predates any claims your nephew makes. Second, we create an irrevocable trust and transfer your major assets into it. House, bank accounts, investments. You maintain full control during your lifetime, but after death distribution follows your exact instructions. Trusts are much harder to challenge than wills. Third, we draft a durable power of attorney that explicitly excludes your nephew and names someone else, a professional fiduciary maybe, to make decisions if you ever do become incapacitated. These 3 documents form a legal fortress. Your nephew can still try to claim incompetence, but he'll be fighting uphill against recent professional evaluations and properly executed estate planning. Most attorneys will tell him not to bother. What about my property in storage? Margaret leaned back in her chair. That's the tactical question. You could revoke authorization today, demand your property back, and end this immediately. But that shows your hand. Your nephew will know you're not the confused old man he thought you were. He'll change strategy, possibly escalate, definitely become more careful. Or you let him continue. Let him take more steps. Let him put his intentions in writing or make statements to third parties that document his mindset. Build a case. Then when you eventually revoke authorization and reclaim your property, you do it from a position of overwhelming strength with evidence of his pattern of behavior. If he'd crossed any legal lines, you could pursue civil or criminal action. That's a risk though. The longer you wait, the more control he accumulates. Margaret's eyes were steady behind her glasses. How much do you trust your ability to play weak while staying strong? I thought about 40 years of property assessments. Sitting across from angry landowners who wanted to dispute their valuations. Staying calm while they yelled. Letting them exhaust themselves before presenting the survey data and comparable sales that proved the assessment was correct. Documentation always won. Emotion always lost. I can play weak. Then my advice is this. Schedule the cognitive evaluation immediately. Start the trust paperwork today. Get the legal fortress built within 2 weeks. During that time, interact with your nephew. Be confused. Be uncertain. Let him make offers in writing. Let him talk to other family members or professionals about your supposed incompetence. Gather evidence. Then once the trust is filed and the evaluation is complete, revoke the storage authorization and demand your property. If he refuses, you have grounds for a civil suit with a documented pattern of exploitation. The case writes itself. How much? For the evaluation, expect $2,000 to $3,000 depending on the neuropsychologist. For the trust creation and power of attorney, my fee is $5,000. Total out-of-pocket around $8,000. I'd spent more than that on Owen's emergencies over the past 3 years. $8,000 to end this permanently seemed reasonable. When can we start? Margaret pulled a form from her drawer. Sign the engagement agreement and I'll start drafting trust documents today. I have a neuropsychologist I refer to regularly, Dr. Sarah Vance, very thorough. I'll have my assistant schedule you for this week if possible. She slid the agreement across the desk. I read it carefully. Scope of work, fee structure, timeline. Everything she'd described, formalized in legal language. I signed at the bottom, dated it with today's date written out in full. Margaret countersigned and handed me a copy. You're now protected by attorney-client privilege. Anything your nephew says or does, document it and tell me. We're building a case. She stood and walked me to the door. Mr. Bell, I've handled dozens of these situations. Adult children or relatives who see an aging family member as an asset to manage rather than a person to respect. The ones who fight back early and decisively always win. The ones who wait out of guilt or hope for reconciliation usually lose. Don't wait. I won't. The elevator down felt faster than the ride up. Gravity assisting. In my truck I sat with the engine running and the air conditioning struggling against the afternoon heat. My shirt was stuck to my back with sweat despite the cold air blowing from the vents. My hands rested on the steering wheel, knuckles slightly swollen from arthritis, liver spots on the backs, the hands of a 66-year-old man who'd worked for 40 years and earned everything he had. Owen thought these hands were too weak to hold onto anything. He was wrong. I drove home through mid-afternoon traffic. The sun was brutal, that white glare that makes the asphalt shimmer and turns steering wheels into branding irons. At a red light on Camelback I watched a young mother try to wrangle two small children across the crosswalk, one pulling away to chase a pigeon while the other cried about something invisible. The mother's face was exhausted patience. I remembered Eleanor looking like that when she'd volunteered at the elementary school, surrounded by chaos. Friday morning I woke at 5 and made blueberry muffins. 12 of them, arranged on a ceramic platter Eleanor had bought at a craft fair in Tucson. The platter had a chip on the rim from where I'd dropped it loading the dishwasher 3 years ago. I'd kept using it anyway because throwing it away felt like throwing away the afternoon we'd spent wandering between vendor tents while she pointed out pottery and jewelry and woven blankets we didn't need but she admired anyway. Owen and Diane Rutherford were expected at 10. I had 5 hours to prepare the stage. I showered and dressed in clothes that looked tired. Khaki pants with a faint stain on the thigh from spaghetti sauce I hadn't been able to wash out completely. Button-down shirt that had gone a little gray from too many cycles through the washing machine with the wrong detergent. Shoes that needed polish. The appearance of a man who'd stopped paying attention to details because the person who used to notice them was gone. I set the muffins on the kitchen table alongside paper napkins and the good butter in a dish. Created the scene of a lonely man trying to be hospitable with whatever skills he had left. At 9:45 I sat in the living room and waited. The empty spaces where furniture had been felt accusatory. Darker rectangles on the hardwood where sunlight hadn't faded the finish. The room looked abandoned even though I was sitting in it. Owen's truck pulled into the driveway at exactly 10. Through the front window I watched him climb out, then walk around to open the passenger door for a woman in a navy pantsuit. Diane Rutherford. Mid-50s probably, carefully styled blonde hair, that polished professional appearance real estate agents cultivate like armor. She carried a leather portfolio and wore heels that would be impractical for anything except looking successful. Owen said something to her as they walked up the path. She laughed, nodded, touched his arm briefly in a gesture that suggested familiarity. They'd worked together before. Rehearsed this. I waited for the doorbell, counted to 5, then answered. Moved slowly like my joints hurt. Let my face arrange itself into something between confusion and relief. Owen smiled wide. Uncle Howie, good morning. This is Diane Rutherford, the agent I told you about. Diane extended her hand. Her grip was firm but brief, professional calculation behind the warmth. Mr. Bell, it's so nice to meet you. Owen's told me wonderful things about you. I stepped back to let them enter. Made the gesture uncertain, like I wasn't sure if inviting them in was the right choice. I made muffins. If you're hungry. How thoughtful. Diane's voice had that practiced enthusiasm that probably sold a lot of houses. Owen walked into the living room and spread his arms. See what I mean? Way too much space for one person. And look how empty it is. Uncle Howie can't even furnish it properly anymore. Diane walked slowly through the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She touched the wall, examined the corner molding, looked up at the ceiling fixture. Owen moved beside her, narrating. He's lived here since the 80s. Great neighborhood, well maintained, but it's just gotten to be too much. The yard work alone is probably overwhelming. I stood in the doorway and watched them. Owen's body language was possessive, proprietary. He moved through the space like he already owned it. Gestured at the empty walls like he was cataloging deficiencies rather than describing a home. Diane made notes on a tablet she'd pulled from her portfolio. How many bedrooms, Mr. Bell? 4. 2 upstairs, 2 down. And bathrooms? 3 full, 1 half. She nodded, typing. And the square footage? 2,200 square feet. Not counting the garage. Owen jumped in before Diane could respond. See, that's what I'm talking about. 2,200 square feet for one person. The heating and cooling bills alone must be killing him. Plus property taxes. Plus maintenance. It's not sustainable. Diane smiled at me with practiced sympathy. Mr. Bell, may I see the rest of the house? Owen can show you. I stayed in the doorway. Let my voice sound tired. I'm going to sit down for a bit. Of course, of course. Owen's hand was on my shoulder, patting, that condescending gesture people use with children and animals. You rest. We'll just take a quick look around. They disappeared upstairs. I could hear Owen's voice through the ceiling, muffled but enthusiastic. Master bedroom here, nice size, needs updating. Guest rooms down the hall. Original fixtures in the bathroom, definitely dated. He was selling my house like it was already his to sell. I walked to the kitchen and poured coffee I didn't want. Let it sit cooling on the counter while I listened to footsteps overhead. Diane's heels. Owen's heavier tread. The sound of doors opening and closing. They were upstairs for 15 minutes. When they came down, Owen was smiling and Diane was making more notes. The house has good bones, she said. Location is excellent. Paradise Valley properties are moving quickly right now. I'd estimate fair market value between $430,000 and $460,000 depending on how quickly you want to sell. Owen leaned against the kitchen counter. Hear that, Uncle Howie? $450,000. That's life-changing money at your age. I held the coffee mug without drinking. Let my hands shake slightly. That seems like a lot. It is a lot. Diane's voice was warm, encouraging. And with the market this strong, I could have buyers lined up within a week of listing. You'd have multiple offers, probably over asking. Could close in 30 days. Where would I go? Owen exchanged a glance with Diane. That's the beautiful part. We sell the house, put you in temporary housing for a month, then move you into a retirement community. I've already researched options. Silverado Springs has independent living units, full kitchens, community activities, medical staff on site. You'd have everything you need. No maintenance, no yard work, no property taxes eating up your savings. I don't know if I want that. Uncle Howie. Owen's voice had an edge now, impatience leaking through the concern. You can't stay here. It's not practical. What if you fall? What if something happens? Diane set her portfolio on the table. Mr. Bell, I've worked with many seniors facing this decision. It's always difficult to leave a family home. But sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves is accept help. Let the people who care about us guide us toward safer options. She said it kindly, but the message was clear. I was being handled. Managed. Guided like livestock toward the gate. I can list the property today if you'd like, Diane continued. Standard commission is 6%. On a $450,000 sale, that's $27,000 in fees, which comes out of the proceeds. You'd net around $420,000 after fees and closing costs. Owen nodded. And I'll help coordinate everything. The packing, the movers, the transition to temporary housing. You won't have to handle any of the logistics. I set the coffee mug down. Let it rattle slightly against the counter. I need to think about it. Uncle Howie, we don't have unlimited time. The market is hot right now. If we wait, that could change. Owen pulled out his phone and showed me something on the screen. Look, here's the Silverado Springs website. Beautiful facility. Pool, fitness center, scheduled activities. You'd make friends. Have a community. Be safe. The photos showed smiling elderly people playing cards and doing water aerobics and eating in a dining hall that looked like a hotel restaurant. Generic happiness. Industrialized comfort. Everything I'd spent 40 years working to avoid. What about my things? Eleanor's things. Owen and Diane exchanged another glance. That's something we'd need to address, Diane said carefully. Most retirement units are much smaller than a house like this. You'd need to downsize significantly. Keep the essentials, donate or sell the rest. Owen jumped back in. But remember, your valuables are already in secure storage. We've handled that part. Now it's just about making the final transition. He'd brought a real estate agent into my kitchen and was discussing liquidating my life while I stood there holding cold coffee. Treating me like I was already incompetent. Already incapable of understanding that he was positioning himself to control $400,000 and make decisions about where I'd spend the rest of my life. The performance was perfect. Better than I'd expected. I let my shoulders slump. Maybe you're right. I just need some time to process all this. Diane smiled. Of course. This is a big decision. Why don't I leave my card and you can call me when you're ready to move forward? She placed her business card on the counter. Embossed lettering, professional headshot, phone number and email. Owen walked her to the door. I heard them talking quietly on the front step, voices too low to make out words. The call came Tuesday afternoon while I was reorganizing the spice cabinet Eleanor had kept alphabetically arranged. Allspice through time, each jar wiped clean and labeled in her careful handwriting. I'd let the system degrade over 3 years, putting things back in wrong places, letting disorder creep in through small acts of not caring. Now I was restoring it. Cinnamon next to cloves. Nutmeg beside oregano. The physical work of putting things in order. Owen's name lit up my phone screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering, kept my voice neutral and slow like I'd been napping. Hello. Uncle Howie. His voice was tight, controlled fury underneath false calm. I got a very interesting letter today. From your lawyer. Certified mail. Oh. Just oh. You want to explain what the hell this is about? My throat felt dry but I kept my breathing even. Margaret said she was sending a revocation of the storage authorization. Yes, she did. She also said I have 72 hours to return your property or you'll sue me. His voice was rising now, the careful control slipping. After everything I've done for you. All the help I've given you. This is how you repay me. You took my property without asking. Owen, I asked you. You signed the form. You told me to do it. The authorization says temporary safeguarding. It doesn't say you own anything. That's lawyer talk. That's them twisting things. We had an agreement. You wanted me to help. No agreement. You showed up with a truck and I signed a paper because my hands were shaking and you made me feel like I didn't have a choice. Silence on his end. 3 seconds. 4. Then his voice came back harder. You're not thinking clearly. Someone's gotten in your head. This lawyer, Margaret whatever her name is, she's manipulating you. Taking advantage of an old man who doesn't understand what's happening. I understand perfectly. Owen, I'm 66 years old, not 90. I worked for the county assessor's office for 40 years. I understand property law and documentation. You took my possessions and stored them under your name. That's conversion. Civil theft. Now you're going to return everything or explain to a judge why you shouldn't. You're making a huge mistake. His voice had gone cold now, threat replacing persuasion. You think you can just cut me out? After I've spent 3 years helping you. Taking care of you. You borrowed $8,300 over 3 years and never repaid a cent. That's not helping. That's using. How dare you? How dare I? I felt heat in my chest, not anger but something colder, more focused. You walked into my house with moving blankets already in your truck. You took Eleanor's things. You brought a real estate agent to my kitchen and discussed selling my home while I stood there. You treated me like I was incompetent. Like I was a problem to be managed instead of a person. The silence stretched longer this time. When Owen spoke again his voice had changed completely, no more pretense of concern or family feeling. Just naked calculation. You want your stuff back? Fine. Come get it. Right now. Meet me at the storage unit in 30 minutes. We'll settle this face to face like adults instead of hiding behind lawyers. The storage facility. His territory. His lease. His control. Exactly where he'd feel most confident. Perfect. I'll be there. I hung up and called Margaret. Her assistant put me through immediately. He wants to meet at the storage facility in 30 minutes. Hand over my property. I'm going. Margaret's voice was sharp. Don't go alone. He's angry and cornered. Cornered animals are dangerous. I know. But this ends today. I'm tired of performing. Take your phone. Keep it recording in your pocket. Get everything he says. If he threatens you, refuses to return property, or admits to any part of his scheme, we'll have it documented. And Mr. Bell. Yes. Be careful. Men like your nephew don't surrender easily. They escalate. I drove to SECU Restore Plus with my phone recording in my shirt pocket. The facility was off Industrial Boulevard, surrounded by chain-link fence, concrete and metal buildings arranged in rows. The gate was open. I pulled through and followed the unit numbers painted on the asphalt. 247 was in the back corner, third building, second floor. Owen's truck was already parked outside. He stood next to the roll-up door of a 10x15 unit, arms crossed, face set in rigid anger. I climbed out of my truck slowly, let him see the stiffness in my movements, the way my knees protested stairs. Played old one more time. Owen didn't move. Didn't speak. Just watched me approach with eyes that had gone flat and cold. I stopped 10 feet away. You said I could get my property. Owen gestured at the unit. It's all here. Everything I took to protect. You want it? Take it. But first we're going to talk about what you owe me. I don't owe you anything. 3 years, Uncle Howie. 3 years I've been taking care of you. Checking on you. Making sure you didn't hurt yourself. And this is the thanks I get. A lawyer's letter threatening to sue me. His voice was getting louder, echoing off the metal buildings. Another tenant 2 units down glanced over then quickly looked away. You took $8,300 from me. Loans you never repaid. That's not taking care of me. That's using me as a bank. Those were emergencies. Family helps family. Then you broke into my house, removed my possessions, stored them under your name, and tried to force me to sell my home. That's not family. That's theft. Owen took a step forward. His hands were clenched, jaw working. You don't get it. You're alone. You can't manage that house. You're going to fall or forget to pay a bill or leave the stove on and burn the place down. Someone needs to make decisions for you before you hurt yourself. I had a cognitive evaluation done Monday. Comprehensive neuropsychological testing. 3 hours of memory tests, problem solving, executive function assessment. Want to know what the doctor said? Owen's expression flickered, uncertainty crossing his face. She said I demonstrate normal cognitive function and full decisional capacity. No impairment. No incompetence. Complete ability to manage my own legal and financial affairs. The report is dated and notarized. You brought a real estate agent to my house 4 days later. Your timeline doesn't work. You can't claim I'm incompetent when I passed professional evaluation after you started your scheme. Owen's face was reddening, neck veins visible. No, you don't understand. I was trying to help. You were trying to control. I pulled folded papers from my jacket pocket. This is an irrevocable trust, filed and active Wednesday. My house, my bank accounts, all my assets are now held in trust. I'm the primary beneficiary during my lifetime. After my death, everything goes to charity. You're explicitly excluded from inheritance. Owen stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. What? You can't sell my house. Can't force me into a retirement home. Can't access my bank accounts. Can't claim inheritance. Everything you've been planning for 3 years just became legally impossible. That's not, you can't just. Owen was breathing hard now, face flushed dark red. Who helped you with this? That lawyer. She's scamming you. Taking your money. I paid her $5,000. That's less than you borrowed from me. And unlike you, she delivered exactly what I paid for. Legal protection. Owen lunged forward, not quite attacking but invading my space, trying to use his size to intimidate. His face was inches from mine, breath hot and smelling like coffee and rage. You think you're so smart? You're a lonely old man playing games you don't understand. I will fight this. I will have you declared incompetent. I will get a judge to see that you're not capable of making these decisions. With what evidence? I stayed still, kept my voice level. I have a dated cognitive evaluation showing competency. I have properly executed trust documents. I have testimony from my banker confirming I manage my accounts responsibly. I have 3 years of tax returns showing financial stability. What do you have? You have a storage unit full of stolen property and a real estate agent who witnessed you treating me like I was senile. Owen's hands came up, not quite touching me but close, trembling with suppressed violence. His voice dropped to something quieter and more dangerous. You're going to regret this. You're going to be alone in that house with no one to help you. And when you fall, when you have a stroke. 3 months passed before I heard Owen's name again. Not from him. From his mother, Eleanor's sister Patricia, calling from Tucson on a Wednesday afternoon in late April. Her voice was tight with embarrassment and something harder underneath, maybe anger directed at her son rather than me. Howie, I need to apologize. I just found out what Owen tried to do. The storage unit, the real estate agent, all of it. I'm so sorry. I told her the truth. That I'd handled it. That Owen had returned my property. That we wouldn't be in contact anymore. She was quiet for a moment, then sighed, a sound like air leaving a tire. He's always been like this. Even as a kid. Saw opportunities instead of people. I'd hoped he'd outgrow it. The conversation ended quickly after that, both of us uncomfortable with the reality that family didn't guarantee decency. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen with cold coffee and thought about Owen. Wondered if he'd found another lonely relative to exploit. Another uncle with property and poor boundaries. Probably. Men like him didn't change strategy. They just found new targets. But he wouldn't try me again. The trust documents and cognitive evaluation and Margaret Chen's number in my phone guaranteed that. I was legally untouchable now. Fireproofed against manipulation. The house settled into new rhythms. I woke early, made breakfast, worked in the garden Eleanor had planted. Tomatoes and peppers and herbs in raised beds she'd built from railroad ties. They'd gone wild during the 3 years I'd ignored them, overtaken by weeds and volunteer growth. Now I was restoring order. Pulling invasive grass. Staking tomato plants. Deadheading the roses that bloomed despite neglect. The work made my knees ache and my lower back complain, but the discomfort felt earned rather than inflicted. Physical labor with visible results. Proof that effort produced outcomes. Mrs. Kowalski started coming over Tuesday afternoons. She'd knock on the back door around 2, carrying containers of whatever she'd cooked that week. Pierogies or stuffed cabbage or beet soup her mother had taught her to make in Warsaw 60 years ago. We'd sit at my kitchen table and eat and talk about nothing important. Neighborhood gossip. Weather predictions. The construction project on Camelback that had been causing traffic problems for months. Simple conversation that didn't require performance or pretense. Just 2 old people who'd outlived their spouses and found comfort in not eating alone. She never asked about Owen. Never mentioned the storage unit or the furniture that had disappeared and reappeared. If she'd heard anything from neighbors, she kept it to herself. I appreciated that. The discretion. The understanding that some humiliations were better left unexamined. In May I started attending the senior center on Thursday mornings. Not for need. For structure. The routine of leaving the house and sitting in a room with other people my age who were navigating similar territory. Widowhood. Retirement. Adult children who called too much or not enough. The feeling of being simultaneously invisible and constantly monitored. We played cards. Drank bad coffee. Complained about prescriptions and politics and the heat that arrived earlier every year. Small rituals that marked time and proved we were still participating in something larger than our individual loneliness. A man named Frank sat next to me during poker one morning, 71 years old, former electrician, wife dead 4 years. He told me his daughter had tried to move him into her guest room after his wife passed. Kept insisting he couldn't manage alone. Couldn't cook or clean or remember his medications. Treated him like he was incompetent. How'd you handle it? I asked. Showed her my bank statements. My tax returns. My medical records. Told her I'd managed 46 years of marriage and 30 years of running my own business and I'd manage being a widower too. Frank smiled, more grimace than humor. She didn't like it. We didn't talk for 6 months. But eventually she realized I wasn't dying or burning my house down or forgetting who I was. Now we have dinner once a week and she doesn't try to manage me. Just visits. I nodded. That's the trick. Making them see you're still competent before they decide you're not. Frank dealt another hand. You sound like you've been through it. My nephew tried something similar. I shut it down. Good. Frank arranged his cards. The ones who wait too long usually lose. Property gets transferred. Power of attorney gets signed. By the time they realize what happened, they don't have legal standing to fight back. I got lucky. Got angry early enough to do something about it. That's not luck. That's knowing when to stop being nice. The game continued. I lost 3 hands and won 2. Drove home with $15 less than I'd started with, but feeling something lighter than I had in months. Connection maybe. The understanding that my experience with Owen wasn't unique. That elder exploitation was common enough that other people recognized the pattern immediately and shared strategies for resistance like soldiers comparing battlefield tactics. June brought monsoon season. Afternoon thunderstorms that turned the sky purple and dropped the temperature 20 degrees in 15 minutes. I'd sit on the back patio during storms, watching lightning fork across the valley, feeling rain blow sideways under the covered area and mist my face and arms. Eleanor used to love monsoons. Would stand in the yard with her face tilted up, letting rain soak her hair and clothes, laughing like weather was entertainment rather than inconvenience. I'd always watched from the patio, too practical to get wet on purpose. Now I regretted that. Regretted choosing comfort over participation. Regretted all the small moments I declined because they seemed unnecessary or inefficient. During one particularly violent storm in late June, I walked out into the rain. Let it hit me full force. Cold and hard and shocking. Soaked my shirt in seconds. Plastered my hair to my skull. Made me gasp from the temperature change. I stood there for 5 minutes, maybe longer, feeling water run down my face and neck, feeling the hard-packed dirt in Eleanor's garden turn to mud under my shoes. Feeling alive in a way I hadn't since she died. Feeling like I'd reclaimed something Owen had tried to take. Not property. Not money. Permission to make my own choices about my own life. Even stupid choices like standing in a thunderstorm at 66 years old because I wanted to. After the storm passed, I went inside and changed into dry clothes. Made tea. Sat at the kitchen table with the cup warming my hands, looking at Eleanor's spice cabinet arranged alphabetically, looking at the clean counters and organized space. The house was mine again. Really mine. Not just legally but emotionally. The storage unit episode had forced me to reckon with something I'd been avoiding for 3 years. That I'd let grief turn me passive. Had let loneliness make me easy to manipulate. Had confused being generous with being weak. Owen had seen that confusion and weaponized it. Had turned my desire to be useful into a mechanism for exploitation. But the trap had closed on him instead of me because I'd woken up before it was too late. Had remembered that 40 years assessing property disputes had taught me exactly how to document a case and exactly when to strike. The documents in my firebox proved it. The trust made it permanent. July marked 3 years since Eleanor died. The anniversary arrived on a Tuesday, bright and brutally hot, temperature hitting 112 degrees by noon. I'd marked previous anniversaries with grief. Staying inside. Looking at photographs. Letting sadness fill the day like smoke fills a burning room. This year I made her favorite meal. Chicken piccata with capers and lemon, rice pilaf, roasted asparagus. Set the table with the good china we'd used for holidays. Poured wine into 2 glasses even though I'd drink alone. Lit candles even though it was still light outside. Sat down and ate slowly, tasting everything, remembering the hundreds of meals we'd shared at this table over 38 years. The conversations. The arguments. The comfortable silences. The evolution of two separate people into something interdependent and functional. She would have been furious about Owen. Would have called him herself and eviscerated him with the sharp wit she deployed when someone crossed boundaries. Would have told him exactly what she thought of men who exploited their relatives and called it helping. Would have made him return everything within 24 hours or faced consequences that would have been creative and devastating. But she also would have been proud of how I'd handled it. The documentation. The patience. The trap that closed around Owen while he thought he was winning. Eleanor always said I was too controlled, too willing to accept poor treatment rather than confront it. But that control had been strategic this time. Had been the weapon that let me gather evidence while Owen dug himself deeper. I finished the meal and cleared the dishes. Blew out the candles. Poured the second glass of wine down the sink. Said goodnight to her memory and meant it as closure rather than grief. 3 years was long enough to mourn. Time to